We have Liz Thomas who would like to make a public comment. So I am going to invite her to do so. Unmute yourself there.
Okay, yes. I just happened to see that this was on the agenda, and I see that there are many others who are part of the IO, but and so as a resident, a plain old resident, not an elected anymore, I am hoping as part of the update on the Water Resource Council that also this group is brought up to full awareness on all the things that are going on with the IO. But I know Cynthia can speak to that, seeing as she's on a million of the different subcommittees. There's a lot of subcommittee work. So I'm just, if you don't mind, I'll just listen in for to that update. But I know that the schedule is packed, but if you ever want more on the IO, we're certainly happy to let you know more. One thing just to make you aware of is that we have been speaking to other watershed organizations, and just to be aware, there's now a watershed manager for Seneca Lake, Owasco Lake, Canandaigua Lake, and Keuka Lake. So the main goal for the IO is to try to get their finances in such a place where Keuka Lake can also have a watershed manager. And that's just all I'll say, unless there are other questions.
Thanks, Liz.
Yeah.
Okay, so changes to the agenda. If NYSEG files its negotiated or proposed negotiated settlement, and if there's time, we will be hearing from Irene and Brian about the NYSEG rate case, and if time permits. So we'll just have to see how that works out. So can I get a motion on the April 27 meeting minutes? Okay, Amanda moves, Dave seconds. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor, roll call vote. Amanda?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Anna?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, so that passes, thank you. Chair's report. I've been pretty much absorbed with the climate and sustainable energy folks. They are champing at the bit to do something. Unfortunately, I have to keep telling them there's not a lot of money to do anything with. They formed a little budget subcommittee, which has fairly quickly evolved into a clean energy workforce development subcommittee. Particularly in the case of Ellie Pfeiffer, who's like 18 and has the energy of a troop of Mongol hordes. She's gotten in contact with all sorts of people, particularly at NYSERDA, and discovered that there's actually a fair amount of money available for workforce development, training, and upskilling for clean energy workers. So I'm hoping that this will be an opportunity for our committee to work closely with Anna's committee and Natalie. And as we try to transition into an economic recovery, we will make every effort to see that that economic recovery is also aimed at a transition to cleaner energy. That's really pretty much all I've got to say about it right now. I did send you all the NYSERDA PowerPoint slides about their many programs. I attended a really long webinar last week. NYSERDA put it together with input from quite a few educational and union and private sector groups who work in the clean energy area. I have notes on that I can send if you're interested. There are actually three takeaways. First of all, the clean energy sector has lost a lot of jobs as a result of the pandemic. NYSERDA has been and determined to replace those jobs. And they are putting money behind that. They indicated that they had, I think, $108 million to train 40,000 workers statewide over the next 5 years. So 108 million sounds like a lot, but 40,000 workers, 5 years, not so much. Still, I'm hoping, I've forwarded this info to Natalie, and I'm hoping that we can take advantage of some of that. And then the other piece of this that I was unaware of is that they are working on a draft of 2 roadmaps, a carbon neutral buildings roadmap and a building electrification roadmap. And those should probably be out in final form the middle of next year, which isn't so far away. So by the time we actually get around to working on our buildings and our facilities, we should be able to take advantage of the roadmap, and that's a good thing. Now, Jason, are you here and ready? Jason sent me a chat and said that he was on another phone call, so I'm not entirely sure if he's ready to give us his report. There he is. Anna, you had a question before we start. Unmute yourself.
Seeing that I keep taking my finger off the bar. Yeah, that would be great if you could share those notes, and I would love to meet with you and talk. Natalie and I have been talking about economic recovery and workforce development, and she was going to update that, so that would be amazing.
Yeah, I sent the NYSERDA oh God.
The PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah, I sent it to Natalie as well. So
and the notes that you took would be amazing.
Well, they're not altogether legible, but okay.
Yours are usually pretty thorough.
All right, Jason.
Hi. How's everybody doing? Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Good. I don't have anything specific to report on peak other than some changes that took place late last week with relating to our COVID response, and that is around 7 o'clock Friday evening, the governor reversed his initial stance on allowing now folks to gather under 10 people. That kind of took our entire communication strategy for the weekend and put it upside down, because we had about, 50 targeted media blitzes and different types of communication strategies that were all geared around not gathering, and then the last minute change that. That was really the biggest change towards the latter part of last week. This last week also they allowed or authorized religious gatherings for 10 people or less, as well as Memorial Day ceremonies for 10 people or less. So those are the major changes. Also earlier in the week, they announced that businesses would be responsible for enforcing their own mask wearing and physical distancing approaches, both for patrons as well as for employees. So that's pretty much the gist of it. It was a quiet weekend for the most part. We didn't have any control room meetings. We had the governor's press conferences were relatively lame, so to speak. Wasn't a lot of new information that we weren't aware of compared to some of the past. So it was a relatively quiet weekend. Very limited complaints, if any, across the community that we received through dispatch. So that's what I have right now.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Jason? All right, you're no longer in demand.
Usually only my wife says that to me, but anyway. I'll be here.
Company.
I'll be in and out of a phone call, but I'll be available.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Committee members' reports. Anything? All right. Planning and Sustainability Department. Megan, Darby. Let's do the bylaws first, Darby. Hi. And then we'll get Megan's report. Oh, wait, we also have the Water Resources Council, and Cynthia's here. That's great. Okay. Darby, you're on.
the Climate and Sustainable Energy Advisory Board worked on and approved some approved bylaws for your consideration to approve to pass on to the legislature. I don't know how much detail you want. There's some purpose included in there, and then just how the meetings would run. And I worked with, had these reviewed by Jonathan, and then Michelle and I went back and forth, making sure a lot of the quorum and other policies were up to date with the county policies. So just would answer any questions, but I think Deborah, you did as much work on them, and the committee had some comments too. So are there any questions?
Yeah, Katie and I talked about this too. It was nice to actually talk to Katie in person, sort of, by phone. It's been a long time no see. We've missed you. It looks like Anna has a question.
Just a quick question about the ex officio role. Can you talk a little bit about the discussion about that? I know there is one person right now, and I'm wondering how that's going.
Yeah, Bob comes to meetings when he can, and he keeps us, okay, for everybody who's not part of this, Bob Howarth is our ex officio member. And we had two thoughts about creating this special position for Bob. First of all, he's on the statewide climate council that was created by the CLCPA. And he's also very busy. So we figured, he might not have time to be a full-time member of our case board, but we certainly wanted his input whenever he was available to give it. And then the second thing was that we had selected as one of our members, Ali Pfeffer, who's one of the Sunrise people. She's finishing her freshman year at Cornell, and we thought she might need a mentor. Boy, were we wrong. She could mentor all of us. But anyhow, it's going really well. Bob pops in when he can, and he keeps us posted on what's going on in Albany with the CLCPA, which is sad to say, not very much. I mean, on the one hand, that's understandable, but on the other hand, it's discouraging. And I don't know that we'll ever want another ex officio member, but if we do, we have the mechanism to create one.
Great, thank you.
Anything else? Are we ready to vote? Okay, roll call. I'm just calling people as I see them. Okay. Wait, Kathy.
I don't think you put it on the table.
Oh, that's right.
So I was just looking to see.
That we need a motion. Anna moves it. Dave seconds it. Now I'll do the roll call. Thanks, Kathy.
Martha has a question, I think.
Martha.
Yeah, hi everybody. Deborah, there was a question early on about this is probably not the bylaws, although it's about membership, about those oath cards. Has that gotten sorted out? I mean, I have the problem.
Yeah, people have been doing it by mail. Irene had that experience. There she is. Yeah.
I have the experience and my unsigned card, which rather than going to a notary, can the clerks who are in the room right now watching this see that this is blank? Can you guys see that this is blank right now? And then I'll sign it and then send it in, and you can say that you witnessed me. Does that work for you?
Sure, we'll do that.
Okay, as a general thing, it seems like such a headache at this moment, and so I know it was a problem for the case board, but I'll throw it out there as something that.
Yeah, it's. But let's vote on the bylaws, and then we can get to that issue because it is an important one. Okay, Irene just stuck it in front of her camera. Did Kathy see that?
Yes, we're all set.
All right. So the bylaws have been moved. They're on the table. I'm going to call the roll. Dan Klein.
Yes.
Amanda Champion.
Yes.
Dave McKenna.
Yes.
Anna Callis.
Yes.
And I'm a yes. All right. Congratulations, Case Board. You now have official bylaws.
Who's the chair?
Terry Carroll is the chair.
Thank you.
Brian, you had a question?
No, I just wanted to say that I got my advice on the yellow card was to sign it, send it to the clerk with my driver's license, and that was acceptable, and that's what I did.
Okay. Brian, can you do me a favor and just send an email to the Case Board in case anybody hasn't resolved this issue so they can do the same thing?
Okay, Darby is the one that arranged this, process. So I'll send them Darby's message if Darby's no longer on.
No, I'm on. I'll take care of it because I think there's only one more person. So I'll look to see who that is. And yeah, I think no need to send something to the whole board.
Okay, great. Thanks, Darby. All right, then. I don't know, Martha, how we want to resolve this issue for the other advisory boards. But maybe that's something that somebody in Jason's shop can take care of. I mean, if Darby's solution works for the Case Board, it should work for the others. So.
Can I just comment? There really haven't been a lot of appointments recently, so I don't think it's a real big issue.
Okay.
Just for your information.
All
If somebody has a question, they can call you, Kathy, and
They can either call me or Maureen, the county clerk.
okay.
Sure.
And do a Zoom signing. I like that, Irene. Good idea.
Yeah, you might have established, you might be the first, Irene. All right, Cynthia. Are you with us? There she is. Hi.
Hi.
So thank you for your Water Resources Council report. It looks like you all have been busy. What would you like to emphasize before we take questions and comments?
Well, first of all, it's one of these situations where I'm so honored to be surrounded by the most incredibly talented, capable, experienced group of volunteers, very engaged. I always learn something at our WRC meetings, which is great. And I actually feel that I'm probably the least knowledgeable of the group, but I'm very honored to be able to chair the WRC. So you've all received the annual report, and basically, just a reminder that the document that guides all of it that's not actually mentioned in the annual report is the water quality strategy report that gets updated every year. And what we do is at the beginning of the year, we go over the water quality strategy report. We think back to what the current conditions are, what the interest level is, what can be accomplished in this coming year. And that's how we put forward the committees and then the priorities of those committees for each and every year. So the annual report is a reflection of that. And like I said, it's just a great group of people. I'm really honored to be a part of all of their work. But if you have any specific questions, the things I think that, I think were just a real accomplishment. The municipal workshop on water quality was just a really, they put together an event in November that was very, very well attended. We've all gotten a lot of positive feedback from municipal employees and community members who are looking to see future workshops. We had our Watershed Rules and Regulations Committee that brought representatives from the Owasco Lake Watershed Organization and the Cayuga County Planning Department to meet with us, in addition with the intermunicipal organization, to give us an overview of the processes that they undertook and are currently in the midst of in terms of updating their watershed rules and regulations, and also establishing or expanding the position of watershed inspector. I believe that they have 2 employees managing and overseeing the watershed there. The harmful algal blooms committee obviously was very active last year. We, as you recall, in the before, we had quite a few algal blooms on Cayuga Lake. So they were also very much involved in ongoing discussions in the watershed and throughout the region with regards to how do we, as you know, and Darby can expand on this more, the DEC is putting together the TMDL, which still has yet to be finalized. And without a TMDL, we're not quite sure what direction we should be taking. A HABs action plan was released for Cayuga Lake, but in outreach to New York State, asking if we're, what is the process that we should be undertaking? Is it the TMDL? Is it the HABs action plan? I don't believe we got a clear understanding of what the format is that we are being asked to take. Anyway, all of this is in the annual report. You have with us today, obviously, Liz Thomas is here, Darby is here, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. It was an active year last year, and we're actually quite proud of our accomplishments. Oh yes, the Education Committee, which I was also on, has finalized its clean boating brochure, which is effectively a map of boating resources on Cayuga Lake on one side, and then the other side is educational material on best practices for clean boating, how to identify HABs and who do you contact if you do see HABs, how do you identify invasive species. And so it's actually, I think, quite beautiful. We're finalized the design, and now committee members are going out looking for resources in the community for publishing this map/brochure, and we're in that process right now. Darby, please jump in. I know that there's huge segments I've probably missed.
I think you hit them all. That was, yeah, this was an active group, and even the Soil Health Committee also held a workshop or conference up at Cornell, and they had over 60 attendees, similar attendance as the municipal training on stream buffers, which was all recorded. Jim Blizzard was really excellent getting that together, and it's all on the Cooperative Extension website.
Okay, questions for Cynthia?
Actually, I see Liz, who's also a member of the IO.
Right.
Was there something that I missed?
Oh, I was just going to say that I think everybody knows that TCOG has also started a water quality subgroup. So that's great, because a lot of the work that that needs to be done, needs the engagement of municipalities. So that'll be great to have them in the loop. I mean, it seems like part of the challenge of all this is that there's so many different groups working on so many different parts of the puzzle that, just keeping communication between everybody is a bit of a challenge. But I think there's enough cross-pollination now with a number of people being on the committees at TCOG, at Water Resource Council, and at the IO, that I think that communication is doing quite well. Roxy Johnston from the city of Ithaca has really taken on leadership for the rules and regulations, which I think all of you are familiar with, that could be a really good regulatory tool for protecting water. It's a long stretch, but just to remind everybody that she has been talking with Bolton Point to see if there's interest in that, and also connecting with the state health department. So there's a lot of activity anyway, and so we'd be happy to keep you posted.
Thanks, Liz. Okay, anybody have questions, comments? Anna?
Thanks, and thank you for the thorough report. I had a few questions. Cynthia, you talked about the map. I'm really glad to hear that that's completed. Is there a digital version of that? Is there? If I recall, that's something you're giving to voters for free. I think there was at one point a conversation of a laminated copy so that they could. There was a whole bunch of things. So I was curious how people can access that and get that, and what's the outreach so voters know about it.
I think the intent is that it would be available on to the county on their website, probably on the WRC website, or I'm presuming anyone could connect to it to get access to it. I believe the current thinking is not necessarily that it be a laminated copy, but more we want to get as many of these out there as possible. So maybe it's not as durable as people would like, and if they want a more durable copy, maybe we could sell those for you know, if we're just looking to have resources to educate, then we want to get as many people access to as many people as possible. And we're in this strange situation now, is like, well, is boating open? Is boating closed? Are these tourism areas open? Are they closed? So I think the initial intent would be to get them out to areas that focus on boating. I'm not quite sure where we are in the status of that. And of course, it'll come down to how many copies we can get with our budget.
So for right now, a digital copy and then some print potentially once we figure out what's going on.
Absolutely, I believe the digital copy will be available through the WRC website.
Great, and there were some amazing presentations done in this last year. Are the PowerPoints available, and are they on the WRC website by any chance, or were any of them recorded?
The PowerPoints should all be on the WRC website. So I think we're redoing the pages. We haven't redone them yet, but right now there's like a page that has the agendas and then minutes and the presentations. So it's easy, especially with the annual report. If you say, oh yeah, Darby did a presentation on wetlands in February, you can find that beside the February agenda.
And my last big question, there's been a lot of conversation in the community. I know maybe a few of you have been involved in that, but a concern that has come up is the potential impact of the data center on our lake, and specifically water pollution, temperature change issues, just the amount of energy that the lake will use. So I'm curious if that's something that you've looked into, and I mention it also in the context of a larger concern. I'm wondering if there's been conversations about the potential local impact of the federal rollbacks of a lot of water quality protections.
So in the past, and so I have to go back in my mind, I did reach out, is it Goodenough? Who was with the power.
Yeah. Good enough.
Yes. And I had asked about the permitting with regards to water cooling of the new facility. And I believe that his response was that they, anything that they're doing would be less than the level of activity that they were using water cooling for the power plant.
Yeah.
And so they anticipated no additional negative impacts as a result of the data center over the coal-fired power plant. But again, it feels like a lifetime ago, but I recall that was his response.
That's what I got from him as well, yeah.
Yeah, and then with regards to the annual report, you see that the executive committee wrote several letters, one of them having specifically to do with the proposed changes to the clean water rule. And the WRC did write a letter basically requesting that any changes be based on scientific evidence. And so far, we did not see scientific rationale for changing the regulations. But I don't recall that we've sent other letters or outreach. I think we did another letter having to do with, Darby, it's not wastewater. It had to do with, no, had to do with the pharmaceutical collection. But that's not what you were talking about in terms of reducing environmental standards.
Yeah, I was more interested if there, and I guess maybe this is also a question for Liz, if there's, because there was a lot of money that this, I think one of them got Seneca Lake manager specifically from the state. I was curious if there's any work that's being done on assessing the local impacts. If there's any funding for that in the IO or any of the partner organizations.
You mean local impacts in case for the changes or proposed changes to the clean water rule?
Yeah.
I don't
I'm
think.
not aware.
Yeah, a lot of that's
Yeah,
been so
look at that.
recent.
Yeah, and that's why it was just a question.
And I don't know how much, honestly, how often has Water Resources Council even met in the last few months?
We have not met since, well, we met this month, but previously not since March. So because of course the advisory committees, as you know, are not being asked to meet, and we don't have telecommunication services available except through, a volunteer providing them. One of the questions that we did end up having last year was, is one of the things that WRC is becoming is a letter writing organization. And then is it for us to write the letter, or is it for us to ask the county to write the letter in terms of commenting on particular changes? As you can see, we wrote quite a few letters. And then of course, actually, there are probably more letters than are represented here because they only come to the executive committee if there wasn't time to bring it to the WRC and have the WRC vote on letters. So there will be other letters that came from the WRC, but they just aren't mentioned in the annual report because they didn't rise to the executive committee. That's actually one of the things I was noticing is like, oh, maybe we should be listing all the letters that we write. Maybe we should be listing all the recommendations that we've made to Tompkins County. For example, one of the recommendations that we made was the adoption of the wetlands map for Tompkins County, which I think was also quite important, but doesn't actually necessarily get articulated in any one of the committee reports. So there's actually a lot of things that the WRC is doing that isn't included here too.
Well, I think Cynthia, that it's great that the WRC writes letters. I think you should keep writing letters. And I think that when you feel that something is really important, you should also, bring it up so that we can put together a resolution for the legislature. Sometimes both the letter and the resolution are appropriate. Sometimes not, but there are two different routes that you can take to get your concerns voiced. So yeah, I'm always happy to help work on a resolution. Liz?
That's great direction. I appreciate that. I'm also, I can, being on the receiving end sometimes there's these letter writing fatigue when you end up with, just slews of requests. They all seem to happen about at the same time. And, so I appreciate that invitation. And of course we have a legislator in our committee and as well as staff.
And she's a good writer too.
Absolutely. So Liz, I think wanted to include something.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say that with the IO work, there is agreement in the IO to try to hire a watershed manager, which would help Tompkins County very much if we had that. And so one of the things, and I'm not sure if this is the route to take, but I think Anna, you sort of pointed to Seneca Lake, and they do have some money from the state, I think through their state senator, perhaps, that helped to get their watershed manager up and running. And it may very well be because the IO here in Cuba Lake has charged so little for so many years. that, you know, we are looking at a change in it's called the fair funding formula. So it'll be a change in the funding, asking all municipalities to pay in to try and fund this person. But we were wondering too, if it might be possible for the state to kick in for like 3 years until we can really, so that municipalities, because nobody has any money now, including the state, but you know, it'd be a far stretch to try and get that at this point. But if the state could share it, as I understand that, whatever that pot of money that's from the state does not allow for the hiring of staff. But maybe we could, you know, through this committee and up through the county legislature, urge the state to help to make that little bridge until we can be self-sustaining. So that's just a thought.
Yeah. Was the IO ever able to nail down exactly where the money came for that Seneca Lake watershed manager? Because the impression I got from one of our IO meetings was that that Pam Helming had been instrumental in getting them a state grant. Then I asked Senator Helming's staff in Albany on one of our little lobbying trips how that worked, and they didn't seem to be aware of that happening. So I don't know where that money came from, and it would be really helpful if we could find out.
I can find out for you and report back. So because I'm not entirely clear on that either, but I have heard several people talk about it. So I'll get back to you on that one.
And Liz, that was what I was thinking. Thank you.
I thought it was a line item. I thought it was a line item expenditure.
Oh, that's possible too. You know, for those of you who haven't been immersed, and there probably aren't very many of you who haven't been immersed in the IO and the WRC and this push for watershed rules and regulations and a watershed manager, this has been going on for quite some time. And the hang up, of course, is the money. And one of the problems we have is when we try to model ourselves on a lake like Owasco. Owasco is basically a one county lake. And Cayuga is going to require that we bring everybody in somehow. I don't know. My impression of the Seneca Lake watershed manager, though, is that that's just something that's centered in Geneva and Seneca County. It's not, it doesn't necessarily have the buy-in of all the surrounding counties and communities. Without that buy-in, I know that the IO probably can't create a watershed manager. And I know that rightly, many of my legislative colleagues feel that if we have a watershed manager, even if Tompkins takes the lead on it, we want contributions from the other counties and municipalities. So that's really been the hang up with a watershed manager for Cayuga Lake. But we're working on it, and I know the IO is working on it. I noticed in your report, Cynthia, that WRC is working on it. I assume since there's so much cross-pollination between the IO and the WRC, that we're all working together on it. So that's a good thing. My guess is, given the pandemic, it's going to be 2022 before we actually can have that person in place. I had a couple of comments too about your report. I wanted to give you a yay hooray on the water withdrawal program that you've started, because I think that that's really proactive. You know, I still follow the news in Texas, where I lived, unfortunately, for 20 years. And I know that there are communities there where the water withdrawals for industrial and commercial purposes have left communities with no water to drink. It's hard to imagine that ever happening to us here, but it's a concern. And then the other thing I wanted to ask you about, I know if this week's any indication, we're going to have a very hot summer, which probably means HABs. And I also know that Soil and Water's been on hold during the pandemic because their programs are considered construction. And unless they were in process when the pandemic hit, they've been dead in the water. So have you at WRC had any communication with John Negley at Soil and Water about what impact you're expecting on HABs this summer?
Again, WRC was suspended by Tompkins County. So our committees have not been meeting. I myself have not been in contact with Soil and Water with regards to that. Perhaps Darby might know more. But
we haven't spoken specifically about HABs or anything. I mean, just because it was winter last week, so it's hard to know that it was going to warm up this week.
Upstate weather.
But I think at least I know one project that they're working on Salmon Creek is the Lansing Highway Department is doing that work, and they're ready to get up and running, I think, next week on that. But in terms, and I know Soil and Water's been busy. I mean, I've been in contact mostly with Angel, just working on different projects. But in terms of what their workload has been and how they've been able to get things, I'm guessing they still haven't hired an engineer, which really.
Oh, well, that's a whole other story. I don't think they're going to hire an engineer. They had one applicant, and first she gave us grief because she was in the process of getting a green card with her husband, and we consulted an attorney. We tried to help figure out how that would work, and then after all of that was settled, she wanted $10,000 or $15,000 more a year than what we were allowed to pay, and it was just like, oh, forget it. And yeah, and now it's June. So I don't know what's going to happen with the engineer thing, but I do know, being on the board, that that we haven't started any new projects.
So is there a possibility of reopening the search?
I don't know. I mean, we have not discussed that on the board. Because basically what we've been concerned about over the past several months is, keeping our employees on the payroll, figuring out what work we could do, what kind of, we can enter into contracts, we just can't start the construction, all of that stuff. We really haven't focused on the engineer since probably late February, early March. And as far as the HABs thing is concerned, you're right. You haven't been meeting. I guess my question was more of a heads up. I think that there may be, we may have another bad summer for HABs, given that Soil and Water is kind of behind on its projects and the weather is promising to be miserable.
Well, I don't know that there is a direct link between what's happening, with creeks and so on. I think this is resulting as a cumulative result of dozens of different impacts that lead to the HABs. So I wouldn't draw a one-to-one conclusion with regards to soil and water activities leading to reduced HABs blooms on the lake, whether or not it's invasive species, whether or not it's phosphorus that's already in the lake, whether or not it's temperature and wind. And, it's like, yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean, with every day that we're not moving forward, we have less chance to make an impact on the very few things that we can control, right? And so it's a sad situation more than anything.
Well, that's almost reassuring, Cynthia. Thank you. Okay. Does anybody have questions? Oh, Darby.
I was just going to say that CSI does have their HABs Harrier program up and running, and they have even more volunteers than last year. So in terms of eyes on the lake, we seems like we have that pretty well covered. So if there are HABs, then people are looking out for it, and CSI will keep their website updated as when they do see cases and then can do the testing on the toxins.
Okay, thanks. Okay, Liz, you're going to wrap this up for us because we've got less than half an hour before Greg Potter turns into a pumpkin, and we still have to hear from Megan and Nancy Jacobson, Miranda Phillips, maybe the person who's going to be filling us up in on the federal bill for carbon fee and dividends. So yeah, hi Miranda. So Liz.
So yeah, I was just going to say that there is a grant that the IO has to identify shovel-ready projects that might tie back to the HABS action plan, that should tie back to the HABS action plan, and also the Cuba Lake Restoration and Protection Plan. So Kathy Bertucci has been reaching out to Soil and Water and planning and highway departments and such to find these shovel-ready projects. Where I'm seeing a disconnect is that, in Ulysses, they were asked, what are your shovel-ready projects? And maybe because they haven't had, municipalities haven't had the education as to what they need to do. Like they don't even know what a retention pond is or a sedimentation pond is. And so they don't know. So we have this little blank spot. It's like, all right, well, we know we're supposed to be doing things, but what are we supposed to do? Here we have an opportunity to identify shovel-ready projects, but municipalities the city, I'm sure knows, but some of the more rural areas, they just don't have it on their radar. So anyway, there's that little, the outreach committee is trying to work on that too, to help educate municipalities as to, like, we have these plans and here's the things you can do. And I know Soil and Water is so busy that, they have a lot of that information, but they're so busy, they can't even come to a lot of the meetings to, help us help them. So anyways, we're aware of the blank spots. And I think that we're working to try and make those bridges. And so I will end there. Thank you for addressing this topic.
No, thank you for your work. I think that suggests a profitable initiative that IO and Water Resources can work on together, which is some kind of education and outreach to the municipalities to let them know that, shovel-ready projects, what they look like, and if they have one, how they should proceed, and if they don't have one, how they can get one. So with that.
Hey, Deborah.
Yes.
Just a quick update that there's an email from Brian that Our Children's Future just won a case with Cargill. Well, there wasn't really a case. I'm sorry. I'm going to rephrase that. There's a settlement in your email about pollution from the salt mines here.
I thought that was a couple of weeks ago.
I just got it like 10 minutes ago, but just anyway, something to share with the Water Resource Council in Darby, and I don't know if you all have seen it.
Okay. All right. So, Megan, Commissioner's report.
I think we actually have Katie on the line as well. So,
but is Katie still serving as our commissioner, or is she our COVID guru?
Both, Deborah.
Okay.
No, I am still working at the EOC, and Megan is ably handling everything in my absence, but we do still coordinate quite a bit, and I know what's going on in the department, and I'm helping as I can.
Okay, so who's going to report? Who's going to give the commissioner's report?
I guess I probably should. We did submit it via email to you all. So I guess I would just say, if you have any questions about it, happy to, between the two of us, we can answer them, I imagine.
I must have missed it.
Oh, okay. The first thing is that just reporting out that the Newfield Planning Board has been successful in getting Cornell University's Design Connect program assistance started hopefully in the fall. Hope everyone's back in school and working. But they're going to be working on the core revitalization plan for the Newfield Hamlet. including, concept plan for improvements to the Main Street area. And that, we can't take credit for that, but I will say that our department, Joan Jerkowicz, did work with the planning board and helped them kind of refine their vision for what they wanted to accomplish in there, and was able to go through the New York Main Street program and realize that that is not a good fit. So it's not a good use of their time to do something like that. So I think it was a good opportunity to try the new program, and just with a little bit of guidance and reviewing documents, reaching out to state contacts, we were able to help that along. So I wanted to highlight that to the group. Also, NYSEG is, they've released their revised schedule for the non-pipe alternative RFP money. And they are hoping to complete that in June. So we have asked for $1.5 million for the airport geothermal system. So fingers crossed that we get good news on that. And we will share that information as soon as we hear something. We did hold the first Zoom version of our Hazard Mitigation Plan Steering Committee meeting. This is kind of the first part of the resiliency and recovery plan that we're working on. It's an updating a plan that you need to have in place for making you eligible for FEMA mitigation money. So it's an important thing to do. All of the towns are participating. And so that is moving forward. And then just letting you know that we do have 2 staff members on furlough right now, full-time furlough, but we are moving forward with that. One of them is our GIS analyst, and David West has a lot of skills in GIS. So he has actually been helping people with GIS needs, including there was a group of realtors who wanted to learn how to use our GIS tools, which he led them through that.
Thank you. I'm curious, before I take questions from other members, has this pandemic impacted the scope of your disaster mitigation plan? I mean, are we starting to think about disasters more broadly than, windstorms and floods?
Yeah, well, we've always included some human-made disasters, although I guess I don't know how you classify a pandemic as I guess it's natural, but yeah, we've always included some of like active terrorism and that type of thing into our hazard mitigation plans. And we actually, the resiliency portion of this grant is a New York State Department of State grant, and there are 5 counties that are all participating in this grant. And we have a call coming up, I think this week, with the 5 counties to talk about strategies. And I imagine that incorporating pandemics into it will be important. We don't have final contract yet for Department of State for the grant, nor we've got a consultant selected, but we need to have a fully executed grant with the state before we want to enter into a contract with the consultant.
Yes.
So we started with the basic hazard mitigation plan update, and we hope within the next few months to be able to expand that to be the full resiliency plan.
Okay, thanks. Anybody else have questions? Okay, seeing none. Miranda, you're on. Anna, did you want to introduce Miranda and why she's here?
Yeah, no, happy to. I have been working on and off with Miranda and the CCL group. That is an effort to citizen climate lobby. I always say CCL. A national group, and there's chapters throughout the entire country, and their effort is to create bipartisan support for a fee and dividend that they have identified as a solution for a massive transition off of fossil fuels to more renewable energy sources, infrastructure. I've been really impressed with the work that they've done, and particularly the focus on bipartisan support. One of the things that I appreciate, Miranda, that you guys have done is to really get grassroots efforts and support. So we have passed a resolution in support of the carbon fee and dividend for the last 2 years, last year, and then 2 years prior to that, when I first got on the legislature, I wrote that with you. And I asked Deborah if it was okay to bring you in to do an update of where that stands. And so I'm going to pass it off to you to give that information.
Thanks so much, Anna. And thanks to all of you. The resolution that you passed in 2019 was the first municipal resolution in favor of this federal carbon tax. It's a species of carbon tax that's revenue neutral. That's why it's called a carbon fee. And it's revenue neutral because all of the revenue goes back to American households in monthly dividend checks. That's the dividend part in carbon fee and dividend. But more simply speaking, it's a carbon tax, a national carbon tax. Tompkins County Legislature was the first in the country to pass a resolution that was in January 2019. Super, super grateful and proud. And I'm here to update you to let you know that 109 municipalities have now endorsed. Yes, in a little more than a year. And what's particularly exciting to me is that in upstate New York, there, of those 109, 19 of them are in upstate New York, and they're across the political spectrum. And if it interests you, if the details interest you, I can send you a list of who are those 19 municipalities and what do I mean across the political spectrum. But very briefly, it runs from some all Republican town boards, as in Kinderhook in the Hudson Valley, to all Democrat town boards, as in City of Rochester. That is to say, when they passed them, they were all Republican, or when they passed them, they were all Democrat, like that, and everything in between. So that's what gives me hope. At the national level, the vast majority of legislators in Congress who supported are Democrat. There's only one Republican. But in the 6 years that I've been working on this, it's always been the case that the grassroots is ahead of the legislators in Congress, and they look to see which way the parade is going, and then they run to get to the front of it. And our job as volunteers is to show them which way the parade is going. And so when I can say to them, hey, look, 19 municipalities across the political spectrum, Tom Reed's office is paying attention and is in conversation with us. The only other piece I'll add, because I know you have things to get to, is that 16 wineries in our district have endorsed. And that's another powerful thing to be able to tell Tom Reed's office. Yes, Anna.
I just wanted to add that 3 years ago when we wrote a resolution, there wasn't an active bill, and the update is that you have now created a bill, and that is what we did a subsequent support for in 2018. So I just wanted to point out that distinction, on the work that you're doing. And also there was a resolution at the EMC, and the reason that that was a focus is because there have not been any EMCs yet who have put forward a formal resolution, and that will hopefully encourage other EMCs to follow suit. So I think that's also an important step you guys are taking.
Yeah, I would just tweak that slightly to say there haven't been any EMCs in our district yet that have endorsed, but in 2 other upstate New York districts they have. Yeah. And our hope is to use that as leverage to get municipalities like we're going to be speaking with the EMC in Chemung in July, and our hope is to if they pass a resolution, to be able to leverage that to ask Elmira to endorse, and et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. So my ask of you is that if you know folks who might be, in other municipalities across the district who might be interested in hearing from us, we do presentations, Zoom presentations, very brief. And thank you.
Thank you, Miranda. Does anybody have questions for Miranda? Martha.
Thank you, Deborah. Hey, Miranda, great to see you. I seem to remember when the presidential primaries when the primary debates were happening, that at least one candidate kind of specifically mentioned carbon fee and dividend. And am I right? And which one or more?
Yeah. I think it was Buttigieg said specifically he was in favor. Yeah, but we're trying not to get very public Democrats to say, hey, we're rah-rah fee and dividend, because then that makes Republicans run the other direction. What our message first and foremost is bipartisan, 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 because the issue is so big that we need bipartisan support to, the issue is so big and the solution is so big that you need bipartisan support to get something like this through Congress and to make it last, because carbon tax has to be in place for 30 years in order to be effective. So it has to appeal through the changes of administration. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, good. Sounds like wise strategy.
And Deborah, the other qualification I think it's important for all of us to know is that the way that the bill has been designed is that the fee increases over time. So it is, to encourage that transition, and it kind of catches those who are lagging. And I really appreciate that effort.
Thank you. I was muting myself because there's a cat in the background playing in a brown paper bag and making brown paper bag crinkly noises. So sorry. Thank you for inviting me, and Anna can give you my contact if you need to be in touch.
Thanks, Miranda, and thanks for your good work on this. Okay. All right, is there anything else? No, there isn't. Greg Potter will be happy to see us sign off before he turns into a pumpkin. So, Martha?
I thought Irene was going to have some time to talk about the rate case, or?
Oh, well, sorry. Irene, can you talk about the rate case? You're muted.
Unmute. So, yeah, for those who maybe joined late and didn't hear the conversation Deborah and I had, we were hoping and expecting that NYSEG would be filing what's called the joint proposal, which is the agreement that's been reached through a year-long negotiation. We expected that they would be filing it this past week. So far, it may or may not have been filed, but it is not publicly posted yet. And until it's publicly posted, we are prohibited from talking about the content. So, so all I can say is stay tuned. As an FYI, we're also on the agenda at the TICP meeting on Friday at 9 to talk about the rate case there. So again, assuming that it gets filed this week, we'll be able to discuss it publicly, and I hope to be on the agenda at TICP. And and assuming that I can talk on Friday, the TICP meeting is a Zoom meeting. It'll be recorded, so if you're not able to make it to the TICP morning meeting, I certainly presume there will be another chance to hear it. And you're welcome to invite me to do a special meeting as well. And I think Brian would want to be a part also. Brian also had a very big role in the NYSEG rate case, as did Carol Chalk. We had 3 of us from Tompkins County, and we really represented, and I think push the company in some good directions. So, so that's what I can say for now. Stay tuned.
So I'd just like to say that we arranged with Deborah to appear today because we thought we'd have something to talk about. The negotiations concluded last Wednesday. The scheduled date for release of the JP was Thursday, and so we're not sure why it's been delayed. But what we're intending to do is come back to the meeting next month with a presentation, and hopefully in conjunction with Deborah, with a resolution in support.
In opposition.
Yeah, well, right. Well, we're not going there yet.
Yeah, we can't say what we think the resolution should say yet, because
I can guess.
But we're working closely with all the other public interest organizations that are parties to the case. And so we're anxious to get out in the public with our ideas on this. And so we'll be coming back. Hopefully you'll be welcome us and support us. And we're going to try to get public statement hearings to allow the public. They had public statement hearings before the rate case negotiations started. And we're going to have to convince them that they need to have more public statement hearings on the proposed settlement.
So this is the same rate case where we had that hearing at the library, right?
It is,
Yes.
yeah. So they introduced it about a year ago, and it's been a very intensive year since then of filing information requests to learn more about what the company envisions in their data, and to get more information about what they've presented. We then had to file written testimony, which is publicly available. I could send you guys that. I don't know if it's useful anymore, but the company's case is their testimony. Then we reply with a bunch of questions to inform ourselves better, and then submit our own testimony. Then the company files a rebuttal to all of the parties' testimony, and included in the parties is staff of the Department of Public Service. And then we entered into, God, I don't know, 6 or more months of
8 months.
8 months of really
Yeah.
intensive negotiations, where I think some of you guys know that I was traveling to Albany. Brian and Carol were sitting on absolutely mind-numbing 6 and 8 hour long phone calls. They don't even use Zoom. They don't even use Zoom. They are just freaking phone calls. I didn't have the attention span for it, so I would drive to Albany to be in the room and look at the faces and have some, rapport with the various parties. So I was staying 3 nights a week in Albany to go to these successive meetings, traveling back and forth. Anyhow, I'm probably the only one who was relieved with the COVID thing, because I didn't have to travel to Albany anymore. But the mind-numbing phone calls continued, and we're finally to the point of we believe that the joint proposal has any day will be filed, and then we can make our opinions about it known. But holy moly, this has been quite a process. I don't, if Brian and I knew what we were getting into, I'm not sure we would have gotten into it, but we did.
Well, if the joint proposal turns out to be as bad as one might fear, maybe we should have a special meeting, and hopefully when we're not in plague lockdown anymore, we can have, public comment. I remember the meeting that we had of Peak where, what was that meeting, Anna, when all the activists came and we had like an hour and a half of public comment?
Yeah, that was the public hearing that we had at the library, specifically with respect to their interest in increasing the fee for the prolonged work on the trees, and management.
No, not that one. I'm talking about the Peak meeting. It had to do with the virtual pipeline. That was what it was. But I mean, we had a really effective turnout in terms of public comment. So maybe we can do something like that. But right now, I think, thank you for all your hard work. Thank you for filling us in.
I would suggest, Deborah, that the more important thing will be to turn out the public to the public hearing that the Department of Public Service conducts.
Exactly.
So they will do another one
rather than at the legislature.
Okay. Will they do another one like the one we had?
We'll be petitioning for them to do that. We don't know whether they'll comply.
So
they may not ever want to come back to Ithaca.
Well, no, so in every rate case, there is an obligation to conduct a public hearing. What's really unusual, and what we petitioned for and persuaded the judges about, in most rate cases, the public hearing happens after the joint proposal is reached. So the problem with that is that the entire negotiation happens in the absence of public input. And so we argued that no, the public needs to, that's just perfunctory. That has no meaning to give public input after an agreement is reached. There needs to be public input before the negotiations start, so that the negotiations are informed by what the public wants and says. And so we made, a verbal appeal. We didn't have to write an appeal to the ALJ, the administrative law judge in charge of the case, and they supported us. And so for the first time ever that we're aware of, there were public hearings before the rate case negotiations took place. We're now going to have to argue why we think there should be another round of public hearings. And it is more typical and traditional to have the public hearings after the joint proposal has been issued. So, so we expect and hope that there will be another round, but I can't promise, given that they already gave us one round of them.
Okay.
There were 1,400 comments, 1,400 comments in the first round. So people are caring about this.
I know. I hate to do this, but I'm really going to have to adjourn the meeting because Greg has to be elsewhere. So can somebody move us to adjournment, please? Anna moves, Amanda seconds. All in favor? Yes. Okay. Everyone said yes for the record. And we are now adjourned with more to come on the rate case. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Deborah.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.